Hello everyone, hope you're doing well. Today in War Thunder it's time to have a look at the AMX 50 Surblindé, but in the game itself. Yes, it was added to the live server, well, today, to be honest, and even though it's not available to everyone, it is available in a user mission, which is what I'm showing you here. Now what we're going to do in this video is talk about the Surblindé compared to the Surblindé, and also give you some more information about where it's going to find itself, either in a tech tree or either in BRs or all of these wonderful things. So the first thing let's talk about is the history behind the Surblindé. Now, when it came to heavy tank projects or medium tank projects, the French went a little bit balls to the wall in the 1950s. They obviously created the AMX 50 platform, which morphed from what we would deem a medium tank into a heavy tank when it's added the 120mm. Now, from this initial version of the AMX 50 120, birthed two more variants in 1955 and 1956. These would be the Surblindé that you see in front of you and the Surblindé, which is of course in the French tech tree at BR 8.0. So let's start off with the Surblindé. The Surblindé was a... Actually no, let's do the Surblindé, sorry. So, the AMX 50 Surblindé, it was a 1955 variant of the AMX 50 120, and the whole point of the idea was to up-armor it. That is why, when you have a look at it, it does have a different hull to the AMX 50, which was inspired by the IS-3, giving it the pike-nosed wedge, meaning that you have extreme angles coming off the center of the hull, meaning that it will increase protection against the general AP shell of the era. This meant that the armor thickness of the hull became incredibly resistant and actually gave you more than 200mm of armor on the front of it. The downside, unfortunately, to adding more armor, especially on the front and the sides of the machine, is obviously this will increase weight. Now, I believe the Surblindé eventually got up to around about 67-68 tons, which is why it's known as the AMX 50 70-tonner. Now, the Surblindé comes into the picture because the Surblindé was the lowered version. The idea was to lower the amount of weight that the machine had to try and make it a little bit lighter so it would be slightly better on the engine. Obviously they wanted to keep the idea of the oscillating turret, but they created a slightly different version of it. Even though it was taller than the Surblindé, it was lighter. The weight dropped to around about 58 tons, and also they lowered the hull, meaning that, you know, it was slightly lower in set than the Surblindé. And they wanted to get more power out of the Maybach engines they were using, and they asked the Germans for help, which is kind of surprising, but the project turned out to be a failure, and the tank was still powered by the 850 horsepower HL295. Now, what is the reason behind the fact that none of these AMX 50s went into mass production? Why did they not go into full service as we may see it? Why didn't they grace us like stuff like the IS-3, even the IS-4, the T-10 being one of the last heavy tanks? What happened with the AMX 50 series? Well, because of the fact that it was delayed a bunch. Obviously these projects, at least the AMX 50, such as the M4 and the 1950 versions, all of these were pretty much designed or created in the late 1940s. And around the late 1940s, you still had the memories of stuff like the Berlin Parade showing off the IS-3, which really took a lot of the Allied nations by storm, because they realized, oh god, you know, the Soviets are creating these pretty much futuristic tanks at the time. You know, you've got completely curved turrets, you've got very large guns, you've got an incredibly powerful engine, and you've got very good armor on the hull. Like, all of these things were matched really well for what would be the first step into a new design of heavy tank. And the French wanted to try this for themselves and obviously put their own spin on it, including, you know, the oscillating turrets, the 120, the slightly different engine. But the problem is, by the time it came out in the 1950s, especially the mid to late 1950s, the heavy tanks were dying. The idea of the heavy tank was very much replaced by the either medium or MBT era, which we now live in today, where you could say a lot of the MBTs are pretty much heavy tanks if you just go by weight, but the difference for them on the battlefield is the place where they are, you know, at least seen as different. So machines like the Surblindé and the Surblindé, they pretty much came out too late. They came out at a time where the T-55 started to be mass-produced. Think about it that way. Also, a year earlier, in 1957, the two Object 430 prototypes, which laid the foundation to the T-64 tank, were produced. So even then, you can tell that these machines were way past their time. Maybe if these had come out late 1940s, early 1950s, you can maybe make an argument for them existing, but the problem is, with the dawn of machines like the T-55, the T-64, heat development started becoming a very large thing. Therefore, heavy tanks were pretty much doomed, to be honest, because their armor was being negated. Therefore, why not create a different system, either such as mesh or the chicken wire express that you see on the M46, or something else to deal with the heat characteristics of the shell, which normal standard armor would not be able to deal with. So all of these factors come together, giving a quite bad picture of, you know, the AMX 50 series of vehicles. But it isn't, you know, all that bad. The oscillating turrets, meaning that you had a slightly lower profile than other vehicles, is always welcome when it comes to, you know, at least in War Thunder. And another thing is they are still powerful machines. They have a large engine power, they have a large gun on them, and the auto-loading system, meaning that they could get a lot of large rounds off over and over and over again. It just is kind of sad for these types of vehicles, and it isn't just the French that suffered from this. The last real heavy tank for the Americans, something like the M103, suffered pretty much the same fate, even though it had some of the best armor and the best gun at the time. The Conqueror series of tank especially was one that took a hit because of these new developments of heat and also these much better protected medium tanks. These Soviets, the ones which created the doctrine behind heavy tanks and also kept holding on to it until the latest point, you know, with stuff like the T-10M and even a tank developed after that, which we've, you know, covered in the last few videos. They still, even then, with the amount of effort and amount of power they put into heavy tanks, realized that it was much better to go for a smaller, slightly lighter, faster machine in the form of stuff like the T-64, T-72 and T-80 with better protection systems. So yeah, it kind of sucks for the Surblindé and the Surblindé, because even though they're amazing and really cool tanks in game, in real life they struggled, is the best way of putting it. So how is the Surblindé going to be different to the Surblindé in game? Well, it's heavier. The gun is incredibly similar, should fire, well, basically the same ammunition, and it should have slightly better armor, but through testing, the armor doesn't seem to make a difference. Something to also bring to your attention is the fact that this machine is labeled not as a premium vehicle. And the reason why we know this is because in the files you can see the mods of the machine, you can see the experience that they're going to cost, and also the Silver Lion cost, whereas when you look at a machine like the XM1, they don't have those values, because technically you'll unlock them before, you know, well, as you purchase the vehicle you'll unlock them, therefore they won't have a cost. So it seems like this vehicle is being set up to be a gift vehicle, and what I mean by that is for a set of challenges to be done, for it in order to unlock it. Now, whether it's through the market, whether it's through the workshop, whether it's through like a World War II Chronicles event, we have no idea, to be honest. And the other thing as well is it does have an MG151 on the top of it, a 20mm, which will help out a lot. Think about the strength of the coaxial on the AMX 30. You know, the AMX 50 will have a similar job where it will be able to gun down much lighter vehicles than itself and do a pretty good job at it. On top of this idea as well, at the moment it is BR 8.0. So it's exactly the same BR as the Surblindé. Now remember, since this vehicle isn't officially live yet, all of these values can change moving forwards. But if it's at 8.0, obviously Gaijin are thinking that this is going to have a similar role to the Surblindé, and to be honest, it doesn't surprise me. You've basically got a slightly slower, slightly heavier, slightly more well-armoured version than the Surblindé, which will also have very similar characteristics when it comes to how it's going to play. So for me, I'm looking forward to it. I'm a big fan of the French autoloading series, and it seems like with the repair costs that they have, a lot of people are as well. Hopefully when the Surblindé comes, it won't be as expensive as some of the other ones around that BR, and hopefully it does come at 8.0 so you can have two massive heavies annihilating things as they go. I'm very happy to see the Surblindé in game, and I want to see what the existing challenge is, or if it's going to be part of the squadron event. Who knows? I hope it comes in a really interesting capacity, so then, you know, we can greet it in the game as it is worthy to, as one of the last heavy tanks which was ever fully developed. Anyway, I hope you all have a wonderful day, and I'll see you next time. I'd just like to thank B. Young, Blackie, Daniel Stanton, Dyslexic Child, Martinez, Matati, Moxie, Nito, Nick Graham, Alobralo, and Super Cacti for supporting me on Patreon.